We didn't know when our lessons would arrive, but they did. And for us, they came when everything was falling apart. That quote is from Zach Berman. In today's episode, you're going to hear how Zach Berman turned a global crisis into a business breakthrough, pivoting the juice truck from brick and mortar juice bars to a thriving wholesale empire found in over 300 stores across Canada. Welcome back to the Mike Method, where we decode what it means to lead, live, and grow intentionally. Today's guest is Zach Berman, co-founder of The Juice Truck, Canada's very first cold pressed juice bar, which he launched with his best friend and business partner, Ryan Slater. From a backpacking trip across Nepal and India to building a household brand that helped to pioneer a movement for health, community, and conscious consumption, Zach has done it all with equal parts heart and hustle. In this episode, we'll dive deep into the powerful philosophy that nothing is good or bad until we assign it meaning, and how that mindset has guided Zach through some of the toughest chapters in business. The moment COVID hit and how Zach, Ryan, and their team had to completely reimagine their model to survive. Why having too many ideas can be both a blessing and a curse, and how Zach built a filter to focus on what truly matters. And the art of building long-term customer relationships by leading with curiosity, trust, and listening before selling. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a creative type, or someone navigating the messy middle of a pivot, Zach's story will remind you that sometimes the biggest disruptions become the clearest invitations to evolve. Let's dive in. Zach, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm excited to jump into conversation and see where this conversation leads today.
And I think we should dive, let's go deep to start. So you have a philosophy, which I love, a philosophy that these situations we're in life, they aren't good or bad, the things that happen to us. They are only good or bad if we apply that meaning to them. And your philosophy is, well, if I don't apply meaning to them and I just say this fact happened, later on, I'll find out whether or not it was good or bad. But right now, it's just a thing that happened. And I don't know if it's good or bad. Where did that come from? Why do you have that belief?
I think we can apply that from multiple kind of angles. From business, that's like a learned trait. We don't know when our lessons are going to arrive. They can be when things are good, but often for myself, my best learning points, my best lessons have been from the opposite, when things are hard. And I think, we want to be comfortable. We want to be cozy. Sometimes we want things to be easy, but, normalizing that hard things can be okay. And hard things can be where we get our greatest lessons and evolutions. And for myself, it's hard to see that when you're in a hard point, when things can feel difficult or sharp or even rock bottom, that, this can be your greatest learning point. But I have found in business and life, my greatest teachings are always when things are harder, when things aren't as I had planned or expected or wanted, but trusting the process through having gone through both great ups and great downs, that, great teachings and lessons and evolutions come often when things are down, and that, life is more, for myself, enjoyable when it's not a straight line, when there are peaks and valleys and obstacles and achievements and a variety of seasons. We have our winter seasons and we have our summer seasons, and seeing both the winter and the summer for their importance. We can't just live in one season, at least in Vancouver where I am.
Yeah.
It's as much as you want it to be summer, that rain's always coming. And, each rainy season, maybe you learn a little bit from the last rainy season and you're a bit more prepared, or you embrace it and you start to love the rain. So I think that's one aspect from it. I think also, just globally, we've seen over the last, it's probably gone on much longer than this, but in the past decade of my life, we've kind of seen lots of division kind of projected onto us culturally. And I think, we all fundamentally want similar things. We want safety, we want food, we want comfort, we want community. We've got those basic kind of needs and desires, and to think one thing or one group or one way of thinking is good or bad is missing so much possibility and so much connection. And I often find in retrospect, the truth is, if we can apply nuance and critical thinking, that most things are both good and bad, and they're neither good or bad as one definitive thing. You can take something that you think is bad and find good in it, and vice versa. You can find good and bad in things that you think might be good, if that makes sense.
I'm curious, you've been on this entrepreneurial journey with Juice Truck for like 15 years now. And I'm curious if you can share some of the stories along the way of some of the like, oh crap moments that you felt like where, oh, this is bad. Like this is bad. And yet in retrospect, you look back and say, actually, that was a pivotal moment in kind of the growth of our business. Yeah. Tell us some of the more poignant stories that come to mind as I say that.
I think there's probably like smaller, and there's lessons and points like this along the whole trajectory of our business. But I think like the biggest one for myself and for many businesses would be kind of the the shake up that COVID, the pandemic, caused to a lot of small businesses. Just never having gone through something like that, not having wasn't in our business plan of how to survive a pandemic when there was lots of lockdowns and consumer habits changed and all of that. So prior to COVID, we were just kind of in like a year over year growth for nearly a decade, and we thought we were on one path, and then all of a sudden we weren't on that path anymore. And as much as we wanted to be on it, the reality had changed, that path wasn't possible anymore. So we tried lots of different things, and in that process we learned what could work, what didn't work. It got scary at times because we were investing blindly in hope versus things that we had a track record in. But ultimately, we brought on my father-in-law, who had more experience in business, Sean Parks. He kind of joined our business and took on more of a mentorship and guidance role for me and my business partner, Ryan. And we just got down to the basics of like numbers tell a story, and leaning into those numbers, going into all of I think when things are hard, we want to create distraction and find places that are comfortable or are easier. So speaking for myself, like it was easier to avoid the hard things because hard things are hard. They're uncomfortable. You have to be honest. You have to do difficult things. You have to have hard conversations. So through Sean's mentorship, we kind of were able to see where our opportunities were, and they were different than where the opportunities were in the past. So we really, before COVID, we were really focused on stores. We wanted to have stores across Canada. That was kind of the direction we were going in, and we loved the model we were building. And then all of a sudden, people weren't coming into stores. They wanted home delivery. So over time, we tried a few things, but we ultimately pivoted towards wholesale being the predominant part of our business. And that was something that we could control. People went to grocery stores. People were still going to coffee shops. People were still ordering, online groceries to be delivered. So we really turned our focus towards wholesale. And when we started to see success there, we just doubled down. And that's kind of been the radical focus of our business ever since, and brought a lot of finding direction, and finding our new North Star kind of brought new purpose and new excitement to the business. It was a new challenge. So, I think numbers, I'm not a numbers guy, but I think, you need to be a numbers person if you're in business. You need to learn that language and figure out where the numbers will kind of tell a story for you of where you're fat, where you could trim your business, where you're losing money, because often there's money we all want to grow our business through sales and revenue and increasing those lines, but you can also cut things and save money for your business, and that changes your bottom line, which is really the most important number in your business.
Going into the pandemic, what was your split between retail and wholesale, like percentage? Was it 50-50 or?
Oh no, we were probably like 80% cafes. Like our numbers were like, food, juices, smoothies, like that was the primary part of our business. We had all these leases that we had kind of agreed to.
Right.
We were able to get out a bunch of them, but that was the plan. Where are we going to open up next? We wanted to be kind of like the Starbucks or the JJ Bean of cold pressed juice, and have one at every busy corner. And the cafes are still an important part of the business, and that'll never change. We've purposed what the cafe experience will be. We don't want to sign big brick and mortar leases anymore, smaller locations and busy places. But they're, they're brand builders, and they kind of have a different purpose in our business plan than they did before.
And how did as that model moved from retail to the wholesale business, like I'm assuming the online business started to pick up at the same time during COVID. So how has do you have like an online delivery business that is like, what happened in that split where retail, because everybody was ordering everything pretty much for DoorDash or delivery in some way, but you're talking about a perishable product that,
Yes.
needs to stay refrigerated and is not everybody, it needs to be, it can't just be sitting at somebody's door for a while. What
Yeah.
happened with that side of the business?
Well, a few things. We first during COVID, we did this like big online pop up where we've always been all about local business, small business. Like we really believe in the local ecosystem. We try to buy as much local produce. We try to, like, in the grocery aspect of our stores, we try to have like as many BC products as possible. So at first, at the beginning of COVID, we did this kind of bootstrap online pop-up where we got all of our friends' brands and we put them all on like a makeshift website, and we did like a weekend sale. And I think we sold like 100 grand in a weekend of like grocery product.
Wow.
So we're like, okay, this
Yeah,
is
this works.
it. But unfortunately, we didn't move. We had that kind of brief test market, but then we didn't. We're like, okay, now we need to build out a proper website, and we created kind of a grocery experience that we wanted to mirror the online experience with, and we just kind of moved too slow. We didn't have the financing or the funding at the time to move quick, and we needed to be faster and scrappier, and we didn't move quick enough to like implement that kind of online demand that there was. We still had like, you could always get our juices online, which was popular, but we didn't move fast enough as a whole. So I think we kind of missed a lot of opportunity there. And then long term, as we kind of grew into more wholesale, like online sales is still a strong part of our business, but we grew from being in like maybe 10 or 15 grocery stores and cafes, and now we're in around 300 grocery stores and cafes, and we've kind of grown that in the last 2 years time. So that's in a good way, it's cannibalized some of our online sales, because previously you couldn't get our juice in whatever community, because
Sure.
we didn't sell any grocers.
Right.
So we do the online delivery. Now you can go to your Whole Foods or your Urban Fare or wherever, and we've got our juice available for those communities. There are a few prongs. I'd say the other thing that we kind of realized, I think just out of like panic and fight or flight during COVID, we were trying to do too many things, and we were like, I would say we were deep, we were shallow and wide, and we kind of repurposed our filter to be deep and narrow. So we're like radically focused on wholesale, and we kind of have this like question we ask, because it's so easy, especially myself, to get distracted by like shiny objects and new ideas. So we're like, anything new, we're like, is this a distraction or is it an action? And
Right.
if it's a distraction, we just drop it. We don't even think twice. And then if it's actionable within that filter of deep and narrow, then we'll explore it. But we're trying to keep the blinders on and not get distracted by every, shiny thing that pops up along the way.
I was listening to a quote of Jeff Bezos last night, and one of his OG second in commands came to him one day and said, "Jeff, you have enough ideas that you generate on a regular basis to completely destroy Amazon." And Jeff was like, oh. And he hadn't thought about the kind of like the wake that he created from all of the shiny objects and ideas that he had. And I think one of the most challenging pieces when you're the visionary of a business and an entrepreneurial business is trying to figure out what is my filter? Like, how do I decide if everything looks like an opportunity, then, and I do everything, I can do everything poorly, or I could say no to almost like every opportunity. So I could say a hell yes to a few, and even those few might not work. And so maybe one of or two of them actually pan out. And I think the other thing is that ideation, I think this is a good idea. I think consumers or businesses are going to buy this. If you spend a lot of time building that out and then you put it out in the market and the market doesn't want it, versus saying, okay, how quickly could I get to market so I can see what the response would be and even know, is this even a viable option for us? So I think there's this intersection of having a filter as an entrepreneur, like, and a lot of times it's the team, right? Sometimes you got to convince them it's a good idea. And then when they're like, oh, maybe it's a good idea, then they got to figure out, can it actually be operationalized, right? To know whether or not they can move forward on it. And then I think the other thing that's important is to have like a testing culture where you can say, okay, Jim Collins would call it like shoot a bullet before you shoot a cannonball. Like try out a small test of this to see whether or not it works. And if it works, then double down and fire a cannonball. And if it doesn't, you haven't put a lot of resources in, you just shot a bullet. So no big deal. I think those two things I've learned in my career as an entrepreneur are pretty critical if you don't want to stay stagnant. You want to continue to innovate and grow. What's your experience been with the juice truck?
Yeah, no, I think those are great points that you make. Like I'm the crazy ideas guy. Like I have
You
like
are
too
okay.
many ideas all the time. And my business partner Ryan and Sean, like they tell me I'm crazy every day, but they're also like the filter, like
Right.
I think like you got to have a process where you can safely, comfortably like express your ideas and your creativity and like I think, the bad ideas get you to the good ideas. So like
Right.
if you're just like it's like you can't just keep all the bad ideas in, otherwise you're not going to get to the good ideas. It's part of the process. So I talk to my business partner Ryan like 5 times a day and I'm mud at the wall like nonstop. And I just am used to them like saying no and telling me to focus and throwing it back at me. Or for me, that's been kind of the filter in the process for finding what's good and what's not. Ryan's much more consistent and critical in a good way. And Sean's got all this great experience that he can kind of guide and mentor us with. And I think my wife's part of the team too, and I kind of see her as like our target market in a lot of ways. So, I think like deep and narrow doesn't mean like be boring. It's still be creative, constantly be working on ideas. I think the bad ideas are part of the creative process, and you have to have like a safe, encouraging space that allows you to have the bad ideas because you don't want to discourage or minimize creativity. Like otherwise you'll go get a you know go watch paint dry. Like it's like you need to have that process, but kind of having your checks and balances. Otherwise, you can just be spinning wildness all the time. And it's also like your customers want you to be predictable, right?
Sure.
Unless your business is unpredictability. But they
Right.
want to like, if they come to the juice truck or they go to Starbucks or JJ Bean or you want to know what your if I go to JJ Bean expecting a coffee and all of a sudden it's a cotton candy company, like, customers aren't going to stick around for too long. So like you need predictability for your team, for your staff, so that they know what to expect as well as your customers. Like I've learned over the years because I have lots of silly ideas and, it's fun. But if I've got my kind of inner group that I share them and they help me filter those ideas and direct them in a positive way. But I do find if I share them with other staff, it can get them kind of misled or misguided in directions that I'm just like spewing directions that we may never go in, and they can hold on to some of these ideas that are just thinking out loud in truth. So I think there has to be some responsibility on how you kind of filter and share your output, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think because it creates whiplash, right? Like if
Yeah.
because people don't know that, hey, we might not do like 20 of these 21 things we're not going to do, but one of them
Yes.
might. And your team that, is the closer team, your business partners and the, operations team you speak to regularly know that this is just how you're wired. And they're like, hey, some of this is going to stick, most of this won't. But for the rest of the team, they in their worlds are like, oh, okay, one of the partners said this, so like I gotta go do something about this or think about this, and I need to start changing our systems to take this into account. Like they think it's like it's happening, right?
Yes.
And it causes this kind of whiplash where they're like, okay, well, what are we doing it? Are we not doing it? And I think it's great that you have that filter in place. One of the things that I say to the team here all the time is if I come up with an idea and it's like, oh, I don't think we can do that. And I'm like, is it no, or is it not now? Like, is it a hard no because it doesn't make sense relative to our strategy, or there's a distraction, or it's operationally heavy? Or is it no, now this season of the year isn't right, or this year isn't right, or we need to do something first before we can do that? Or is it just like a hard no? Because sometimes it's like, oh, well, we can't do it right now because we have all these other things going on, but we could consider it as part of the strategy next year. I'm like, okay, well, we're doing that in November and that's like, 7 weeks away. So cool. I'll hold on to it and I'll just put it in, like, I'll write it down in my strategy note. And then sometimes I think about it for a while and I start thinking about the reality of what that would look like. And I think about the economic equation and I start looking at some financial modeling and I'm like, this is a terrible idea. So I don't even want to bring it up again. And if somebody asks me, I'm like, yeah, I really thought it was a great idea until I thought about what it would take to actually do it. And it just would be chaos to pull this off. And it really isn't worth it's not, what's the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Like, I don't, just right. Like, it just isn't worth it. So yeah, I'm off that thing now. And I hope that nobody went and did anything with it because I was just throwing it out there just to see what people thought. And also I find sometimes that there's like remixing that occurs when you throw ideas out. Like if you throw a bunch of ideas out, people will be like, oh, I'm not a fan of any of those things individually, but two of them could work together. And let's work on that. I'm like, oh, I hadn't thought about putting those two things together. Sure. Okay. Let's see if that works. Right. And then let's see if we can find the right customer group that would love this thing because it could be amazing and nobody could buy it.
Absolutely. I like what you said about like not now and the seasons, because sometimes that's the case. I think if you're an entrepreneur or you're a visionary or creative, sometimes you see further down the road than maybe like an operator or someone that's more macro in their kind of thinking. And if you kind of can see the finish line or the direction, sometimes there's a desire to get there now. But patience and knowing that, something that's for tomorrow, but not today, there's kind of you need to trust the process and the timeline and be consistent and know that like I get excited all the time. I want the things that I see there 2 years from now. And I don't want to, follow the process, even though I know, we need to walk before we run to get to those places. So I think like the not now, but maybe later is a good reminder.
Yeah, my curiosity sometimes I'll just throw the idea out and say, like, how long would it take to actually, like, could we do this in 2027 or could we do it in 2026? And then wait to see if people are like, well, actually, we could do it a lot sooner. And here's how we could do it. Cause I'm not going to probably be involved really in the how. I'll just have the what, the concept or the idea. And other times it's, putting it out to say, I think this might work. I don't know how we could test it or where it would fit. And I don't even know if it's a good idea or not, but I'm just going to like throw it out in the world and then just leave it. And don't try to convince anybody about it. Just throw it out there. Maybe we could do this and then see what comes back. Because sometimes what comes back is like quite fascinating and usually better than what I was thinking. That's the most common thing I get. Like I have it 80%, 70% formed out. And then when it comes back to me, it's more like 120. Like it's above what I thought 100% was because I involved really smart people that have the detailed operations brain mindset of how to pull this stuff off, and they've taken it somewhere that I wasn't even considering.
So what's your process for ideation? Like if you have a new direction or idea that you want to explore, what's kind of your process from like idea to kind of putting it out there as a product or experience?
My first thing is, it's a great question. So my first thing is, do we have an existing client who would find economic value from this thing? Because if we don't, then we're imagining there's some imaginary client out there that's going to love this thing that we haven't even met yet. So now I've got a new product and a new client, and those are not good innovation places. Like that's the last place I want to go. My first thought is, do I have an existing client that I could work with this new product? And does it connect to something we already have? Like, can I take something we already do, add this new thing on, but sell it to the same client that we already have a trusted relationship with? And would that improve the outcome of what we do with them? So that's where my starting point is. And then I'm constantly looking at what are other industries doing that I find fascinating, and like, what's our version of doing that in our space? And sometimes that leads me down a rabbit hole to an idea that I'm like, this makes no sense. Like, we just should not do this. And other times it's like, oh, maybe we could pull off our version of that. And So then I run it out and I'll start when I feel like it's got potentially has legs. I want to talk to somebody, one of the other leaders in the company, and just say like, hey, if we did do this, like what would that look like? And what client? I was thinking this client, do you think we could add this on to this program? And it's kind of thinking we would price it something like this, which feels like a good economic value for them. It adds a lot of value and it creates some sustainment for them. And it creates a subscription revenue for us. So that's good. So good for them, good for us. Do you think we could do this? And then I'll usually just in casual conversation with a client, just sort of float it out there. Like, hey, we're just thinking about doing this thing. It would, I don't know, like probably like a next year type thing, but we'd probably run a beta with one of our clients. I just wanted to run the idea past you and see what you think. And interestingly, quite a few clients have said, yeah, we'll do that with you. We'll try
I think
that.
that's I like that process. Like, I think it's really good to be curious and collect lots of information before we make decisions. Like, if you already have your customer base, you kind of know who you're like, take your top 100 or whatever, and just, let them kind of be the guidance for your business in that sense. Like, what do you want? What do you guys like? I heard this question like the other day, and I haven't implemented it, but I thought it was interesting. Like, asking your customers, like, what are you doing right? Like, what are we doing right as a business? And then the kind of trick there is, okay, like, okay, you're hearing what they want, what they value in your business, and then you can kind of put more time into what they value, or the experience that they get the most out of. And then you could ask, like, what do you think is wrong with our industry right now versus your business? Because then that
Mm-hmm.
can be more, if you said what's wrong with our business, they might
Yes.
be too kind,
Yes.
or they don't want to hurt your feelings or be too critical. But you can say, like, what do you see as like what's wrong with our industry, or like the biggest kind of blind spot in our industry? And then those two kind of simple questions can give you a lot of information of what your customers value, and where maybe the biggest opportunities in your industry are.
Well, it's what I love about the both those questions. The first one, what do you love about our business, is like then we can double down on something you actually.
Yes.
They're basically saying, I value this thing, so I'm
Yes.
exchanging money for this thing you do for me, and it may be an intangible, like it may not even be something that you think is a valuable thing that you do, but to them it's actually quite valuable, and you can double down on it. The second question, I love, because you're right, it gets that barrier out of the way of them feeling like they're criticizing your business, but it also says that this is wrong in the industry. If that's wrong in the industry, there's a competitive advantage to fixing that thing. It means most people don't want to fix it and are quite happy in being in a competitive space where that part of the industry is broken. And there's the opportunity for you to do something that actually differentiates you from all your customers, and usually is super annoying to your competitors because they don't want to do it, or they would have done it. And they like that that's actually a problem with the industry because somehow it's benefiting them and it's not benefiting their customers.
I like that. I find too, like, the people that we resonate to most are like the ones that make those connections, and it could be through fun questions like that, or just like having general curiosity.
Yeah.
When I go into a sales meeting, instead of trying to sell the product, I usually just ask a lot of questions about the people that I'm trying to sell to, so
Yeah.
that all of a sudden I have this connection to them. Like, oh, like both of our kids play soccer, or oh, we both grew up in this neighborhood, or
Yeah.
like, we both like the silly TV show. And then we have all these contact points, and our product is like secondary. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, now we've built a relationship. And then when I connect with them, we're not just talking about transactional points. I'm not just being like, how much did you sell? Or like, the relationship isn't a transactional one. You start to build those foundations that you can grow long term with. And I find those are the people that we will grow with, because, it might be a strategy, but it turns into a real relationship just because you're being curious, you're being compassionate and kind, and you're not just looking for like a bottom line deal. So I try to kind of approach any meetings with asking questions rather than trying to sell something. And then the sale happens, and we've established kind of a connection beyond a product. And it's kind of a no-brainer at that point, because, if it's you guys, it's like there's these other people that you don't have a relationship with that have a similar product that we could buy, but they're in Ottawa, or they're in Montreal, or they're in Toronto, and we don't have that foundational relationship to rely on. if X and Y, goes wrong or whatnot. So we always believe in like relationships before transactions,
Mhm.
and the relationships lead to long-standing transactions versus ones that are passing or are built on, a house of cards kind of thing.
What I've reflected on is, looking back over the history of my business, that there, when we say B2B, so we're imagining that a business is buying something from another business, but the reality is there's like a human being who's making that decision to buy a product or a service. And then there's another human being that is selling that product or service on the other side. And people want to work with people they like, trust, and respect. And
Yeah.
so we're all really in the relationship business in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I guess you could argue that, if you're buying juice from a website, then really you're having a brand affinity, but there's still a human being engaged and involved that has to trust your brand, that trusts the product that you're sending out to them. And so, in our business, I always say to the team, like, we're in the business of building trusted relationships. And when we have that, we get the luxury and the privilege of being able to do leadership development with these firms. We've been doing it for 25 years. We know we can deliver on the promises, but the issue is, can we build a relationship of trust at the beginning? Because that tells them that because most of the things we do take anywhere from 1 to, in one case, it's like 18 years we've been working with the same company. We're going to be in a relationship for a long time. So we have to be able to show that we're the type of people that they want to invest, a pretty good deal of their life in. And my favorite sort of mark of that is on our team right now, there are 4, maybe 5 of the team members were actually our customers. And when they left the business that they were working with, that we partnered with, they came and worked here. And
That's
still
awesome.
do. And that for me is like the ultimate compliment in terms of how we build partnerships and relationships.
I love that. To kind of flip one of the questions on you. So if you were looking at the cold pressed juice world, or like, let's call it like healthy beverages, what would you say is like what do you think are the biggest issues or red flags in that industry for yourself?
I think I would expand the cold pressed juice industry to include the kombucha and kefir, because I think
Sure.
they're in the same kind of place. And I would
Yeah.
include, I know cold pressed juice also includes the shots, but I would call the juice shots. I would say that whole space is its own space separate from like the protein shakes smoothie industry. I think that's it might be the same client, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
go and purchase a smoothie over like a protein shake over getting a juice. Like there's a very different reason that I'm making that purchase. And I think it's like the world has understands that like most soft drinks are just not good for us, but we want something that's flavorful. We want something that has a signature taste to it. We want the formula to stay the same so that when I buy that bottle, it always, like, we're not going to the old Coke, new Coke type thing. And I think that whole space, there's so many brands. And so, when I go to them before, it was like kombucha was 2 brands. So I have to pick between the flavors of the 2 brands, right? And those are my choices. But I think the interesting thing about the juice space is, as much as you can buy a cold press juicer for your house, you just go buy the machine and then buy all of the vegetables that go with it. One, you're creating a mass amount of compost, which mostly, and for most people, they're not doing anything useful with it. They're dumping it in a compost bin, which weighs a lot and actually creates a negative externality, because when all that liquid compost goes downstairs whether it's into your compost bin at your house or it goes into a compost bin in an apartment building, they have to move the water. Like, the actual weight of the compost is very, very little, but when it's full of water, even after you've juiced it, it's still very heavy. And there's actually a cost to trucking that away, even though you think you're doing a good thing for the environment. Whereas in a facility like yours, where you're able to press it out and then you can deal with the externalities, like, what to do with it, not just throw it into the compost and hope something good happens to it, right? You're actually doing better for society, particularly because your containers are also recyclable, than you would be trying to do it at home. Plus, it's just a lot of work to actually
It
get
is.
really good quality cold pressed juice at home. And it's just so much easier. So I feel like there's a sense of ease. There's a flavor profile and a mixing of flavors that's really tough to get right, having tried to myself at home, that is just reliable. Like, I know that if I go get something from the juice truck, I know what it's going to taste like, and it's going to be consistent every time. It's going to be fresh product. I don't have to worry if I make a big batch that I'm not going to drink it all because I'm buying the size that I want. But I think the thing I think about the industry is anything in the RTD space that's non-alcoholic is really going to take over the kind of soft drink space eventually. Like I think we're moving in that direction. So I don't have a concern. I have excitement for the space that you're in.
I love it. Yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting brands. Like I know they've grown rapidly, but I'm so inspired by, and they're very different than what we do. But like the Poppy and Olipop and
Yeah.
the disruptors of the spaces like Smart Suites here in Vancouver.
Yeah.
The brands that kind of disrupt spaces. Midday Square is another Canadian
Right.
one. I think Jake Carls and his team, his family have done an incredible job with that brand. So I'm always excited to follow the disruptors and see what they're doing and follow their lead in some ways.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today, Zach, and just to share your story. Um, I know you've been on an incredible ride over the last 15 years with yourself and your partners and your whole team to bring cold pressed juice out to the world. Yeah, thanks for making time to just be in conversation today.
Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate it.